The first knock sounded like a fist through glass. I opened my apartment door, expecting a delivery. Maybe a neighbor with a complaint. Maybe the landlord finally deciding to fix the leak in my ceiling. Instead, I found two men in dark suits standing under the yellow hallway light, one of them holding a badge, the other staring at me like he had already read my entire life in a file folder. "Miss Harper?" the taller one asked. My stomach dropped. "Yes, I'm Special Agent Daniel Ruiz, FBI. This is Agent Patel. We need to ask you a few questions about an inheritance, identity fraud, and a series of financial transfers involving your late grandfather's estate." For a second, I couldn't hear anything but the roaring in my ears. Inheritance, identity fraud. Those words didn't belong together in my life. Not in my tiny one-bedroom apartment with the crooked bookshelf and the overdue utility bill taped to the fridge. I whispered, "There has to be some mistake." Agent Ruiz's face didn't change. "We don't think so." Then he asked the question that made my knees go weak. "Is your sister, Vanessa Harper, currently inside your mother's house under your name?" I just stood there with my hand still on the doorknob, the cold chain hanging loose, my heart kicking so hard it hurt. Because if the FBI was at my door asking about Vanessa, that meant the lie had finally started to unravel. And if the lie had unraveled, then everything I had spent the last 6 months trying to prove had been true. My sister had stolen my identity to get $5 million. And the worst part was, she did it so smoothly that for a while, even I started wondering if I was the one losing my mind. Vanessa and I were only 17 months apart, but people always said we looked like we came from two different families. She was the polished one, the pretty one, the one who learned how to walk into a room and make people feel lucky to be looking at her. I was the quiet one, the one who stayed late to help clean up after holidays, the one who got good grades and worked part-time jobs and remembered birthdays and pharmacy pickups and the names of everyone's dogs. Growing up in Cedar Falls, Ohio, our house had always been full of tension that sounded like normal family life if you didn't pay attention too closely. Our dad left when I was 12, and after that my mom built her whole world around survival, which mostly meant leaning on whichever daughter could make her life easier. That daughter was never me. Vanessa learned early that tears worked better than apologies. She could break a vase, blame the cat, and my mom would sigh and say, "She's sensitive." If I came home with a B instead of an A, my mom would ask what I'd been doing wrong. If Vanessa wrecked her car, my mom would sell her jewelry to help with the repair. If I asked for gas money to get to my second job, I got a lecture about responsibility. But none of that prepared me for the way she changed after Grandpa Walter died. My grandfather was my mother's father, a retired machinist with hard hands, sharp opinions, and a soft spot for me that no one in the family liked to talk about. He never trusted people who smiled too much, which meant Vanessa annoyed him immediately, and my mother spent most family dinners trying to steer the conversation away from anything honest. I was the one who started taking him to doctor appointments after his wife passed. I was the one who figured out his medication schedule, paid his electric bill online when his arthritis flared up, and sat with him in the hospital when pneumonia nearly took him. He used to say, I had the rare sense God forgets to give to loud people. On the day he died, he held my hand and said, "Don't let them tell you you're small, Ellie. You're the only one in this family who sees straight." I didn't understand that sentence until much later. 3 months after the funeral, a probate attorney called me and asked if I could come to his office with my ID. That was the first crack. The attorney, a woman named Linda Sato, had a folder on her desk and an expression that was calm in the way people get when they're trying not to look alarmed. "Your grandfather's trust contained a private inheritance clause," she told me. "It names you as sole beneficiary of a separate family asset portfolio worth approximately $5 million. I stared at her. $5 million? She nodded. "There are several legal hurdles before disbursement, including identity verification, tax documentation, and signed release forms. The issue is, someone already attempted to contact the bank using your name. The room went cold. A person identifying as Evelyn Harper. "I'm Eleanor Harper," I said automatically. "Right." She looked down at the file. "The person claiming to be you submitted a copy of your driver's license, a recent utility statement, and a notarized affidavit. The documents were suspicious. The bank froze the account." My throat tightened. "Who was it?" She hesitated for only a second. "We're still confirming, but the phone number used traces back to a device registered to Vanessa Harper." I laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. No, that's impossible." But even as I said it, I remembered the strange calls Vanessa had made after the funeral. The too sweet texts, the sudden interest in what Grandpa might have left behind, the way she'd casually asked if I had handled all the legal stuff yet. I left the office shaking so hard I had to sit in my car for 10 minutes before I could drive home. When I confronted my mother that night, she was standing at the sink, drying a plate that was already dry. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "did Vanessa ever ask you to use my documents?" She didn't look at me. "Why would she do that?" "Because someone tried to claim Grandpa's inheritance using my name." That got her attention. She turned around too quickly, dish towel in hand. "What are you talking about?" I told her everything. The attorney, the bank, the fake affidavit, Vanessa's number on the registration notes. My mother's face changed the way it always did when she was about to pick a side and pretend it was logic. "She wouldn't do that," she said. "Not to family." I almost laughed in her face. "She stole my Social Security card when I was 19 and blamed it on me when it went missing. That's ancient history. It's identity theft." "It's your sister," she snapped, and there it was, the shield. The same old shield. Blood is blood. Family protects family. The words people use when they want you to stay quiet long enough for them to keep winning. I walked out before I started screaming. For the next 2 weeks, I tried to handle it like a responsible adult. I filed a police report. I called the bank. I hired a lawyer I couldn't afford, then maxed out a credit card just to keep him. I gave him every text Vanessa had sent me, every copy of the probate paperwork, every email from the attorney. He read through it all and slowly leaned back in his chair. "Your sister didn't just impersonate you," he said. "She built a paper trail." I blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means this wasn't a one-time lie. She seems to have used your identity for credit applications, utility accounts, maybe even a business filing. The inheritance just became the biggest target." I felt sick. "I never opened any of those accounts." "I know." He tapped the file. "But someone used your name, your date of birth, and enough personal information to make it look legitimate." That was the first time I realized how deep it went. Vanessa hadn't just stolen money. She had been building a second life in my name. And while I was doing everything I could to stop her, she was doing everything she could to make me look unstable. The calls started in the middle of the night. "Ellie, pick up," she'd say, in a voice syrupy with fake concern. "Mom says you're having some kind of episode." I'd hang up. Then she started sending screenshots. A fake email chain, allegedly from the probate attorney. A document with my name misspelled on it. A text from an unknown number saying, "Please verify your new mailing address." When I ignored that, she showed up at my apartment with a coffee and tears in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, standing in my doorway like she had the right. "Do you know what this is doing to Mom?" I stared at her. "You forged my identity." She touched her chest like I'd slapped her. "You're making a huge accusation based on a misunderstanding." There was no misunderstanding. The attorney has records. Records can be wrong. Not this many records. Her eyes narrowed, just for a second. That was the real Vanessa peeking through the performance, the one who calculated before she cried. Then her face crumpled again. "You've always hated that I got attention. Just say you don't want me to have anything and be done with it." I could not believe what I was hearing. "You're not even pretending to deny it. I'm saying you're exaggerating. You stole $5 million. She looked around my apartment with a kind of pity that made me want to throw the coffee in her face. "You think you were getting that money anyway? Mom said Grandpa promised it to the family, not just you." It took me a moment to realize what she'd just said. Mom knew? Vanessa's mouth twitched. I didn't say that. She left before I could ask another question, but the damage was done. Because now I knew my mother wasn't just being passive. She was involved enough to tell Vanessa things I had never said out loud. That night, I went to her house. She lived in the same split-level place I'd grown up in, the one with the peeling white trim and the porch light that flickered when it rained. I parked behind Vanessa's silver SUV and sat in the car for a moment, staring at the dark windows. Something in me still wanted this to be a misunderstanding, some insane, reversible mess, some family disagreement blown out of proportion. Then I saw the living room light come on, and through the curtain I saw Vanessa laughing at something on her phone. Not crying, not worried, laughing. I went to the door and knocked. My mother opened it and froze. Behind her, Vanessa said, "Oh, great, she's here." I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Did you tell her Grandpa left me the inheritance?" My mother's mouth tightened. "You're making a scene. Answer the question." Vanessa set her phone down. "Mom didn't tell me anything I didn't already know." I looked at both of them. "So you both knew?" Silence. It was the kind of silence that tells you the truth before anyone says it. My chest felt like it had been stitched shut. My mother finally said, "You don't understand how much this family sacrificed." I stared at her. "Sacrificed for what?" "For years, Ellie," she said, voice rising. "You've acted like you were the only one who did anything. You got to go to college. You got to leave. Vanessa stayed. Vanessa helped me. Vanessa stayed when your grandfather was getting worse, and you were off, chasing your little life." I almost couldn't breathe. "I took Grandpa to chemo. She was here for me." There it was, the whole rotten center of it. In my mother's mind, proximity counted more than truth. Vanessa being present mattered more than Vanessa being honest. Maybe because my mother liked being needed. Maybe because she liked believing the prettier lie. "So, you let her steal my identity because she helped you with groceries?" Vanessa crossed her arms. "You were going to get it all anyway. Grandpa always liked you best." "That's not what happened." "It is what happened to me," she snapped. "You think because he gave you some sweet little speech in a hospital room that you were his favorite? He barely knew me because Mom kept dragging me out of the house to do errands while you played nurse." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You were 32 and still asking Mom to call in your dentist appointments." Vanessa's face hardened. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Talk like you're morally superior because you're quieter." I felt my hands shaking. Being quieter isn't the same as stealing. My mother stepped between us. "Enough. We're not doing this tonight." But I wasn't done. "Did you help her?" Neither of them answered. That was answer enough. I backed toward the door, my voice suddenly flat. "If you think you can do this and nothing will happen, you're wrong." Vanessa smiled, in a way that made my skin crawl. "Who are you going to tell? Mom? The bank? Your lawyer who bills by the hour and still can't prove anything?" I left without another word, and when I got to my car, I sat there gripping the wheel until my fingers ached. What Vanessa didn't know was that my lawyer had already connected her to a string of older accounts. The bank investigator had found a storage locker lease, a phone plan, and 2 personal loans taken out under my name using information that would have been impossible to get unless someone had physical access to my documents. The locker itself contained old paperwork, tax forms, and a laptop with files saved under a folder named Ellie. The laptop belonged to Vanessa. Her fingerprint unlocked it. That was the first time I felt hope. But hope is a dangerous thing when you're dealing with family, because family knows exactly where to punch. Vanessa didn't wait for the investigation to finish. She escalated first. 3 days later, a sheriff's deputy came to my apartment because my mother had reported that I was harassing her and threatening the family over delusional claims about an inheritance. I was standing in my kitchen, holding a spoon when he asked me to step outside. I couldn't believe it. "She called the police on me?" The deputy looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I'm just here to ask questions." "She's lying. I understand. But I need you to tell me whether you've made any threats." "No." "Have you shown up uninvited at your mother's home?" "Yes, to ask why her daughter stole my identity." He looked down at his notebook. That sounds like a civil issue. I stared at him in disbelief. Someone used my name to commit fraud. He shrugged the slightest bit, the way people do when they're already deciding you're too complicated to help. Then your attorney should handle it. When he left, I sat on my couch and cried in anger so hot it barely felt like crying. That was exactly what Vanessa wanted. She wanted me exhausted, embarrassed, and alone. And for one terrible week, it worked. My calls to my mother went unanswered. Vanessa blocked me on everything. I got one anonymous text that simply said, "Let it go before it gets worse." I didn't know whether it came from her or my mother, and that uncertainty terrified me more than the threat itself. Then something happened that changed the entire case. My grandfather's old accountant, a man named Harold Pike, called me after seeing the news about an unrelated estate fraud ring in the county. He said he'd been reviewing Walter's tax files and found a discrepancy. "Your sister," he said carefully, "came to my office 8 months ago." My heart started pounding. "Why?" "She claimed she was helping you gather documents for the inheritance claim." I went cold. "She told you she was me?" "Yes." He paused. "She had a copy of your driver's license and your birth certificate. She also had a notarized power of attorney." I nearly dropped the phone. "That's impossible. I never signed any power of attorney." "I know." His voice was grim. "The notary stamp was real, but the signature was not. I've already spoken to the investigator from the bank. There's more. Your grandfather's original trust amendment wasn't filed through probate court. It was routed through a private family attorney in Indianapolis." That stopped me. Why does that matter? Because someone knew the trust had to be verified out of state before release. This wasn't an impulsive scam. It was organized. When I hung up, my hands were shaking so badly, I had to grip the counter. The story was no longer just about one greedy sister. It was about planning, patience, intent. Vanessa hadn't fallen into this by accident. She had studied the inheritance like a lock she planned to pick. That night, I called my lawyer and told him everything. He was silent for a long moment, then said, "I think it's time to get federal involved." And that's how the FBI entered my life. Not as a dramatic rescue, not with music and spotless justice. They came in the ordinary way real consequences do, with questions, records, subpoenas, and a level of calm that made the whole thing feel colder than yelling ever could. Agent Ruiz and Agent Patel spent hours with me in my apartment. They asked about my childhood, my grandfather, my sister's habits, my mother's access to my papers, any old passwords Vanessa might know, whether I'd ever given her a copy of my ID, whether she had ever used my phone. "Yes," I admitted. "She used to answer my calls when we lived together because she said I was too slow." "Do you think she had access to your mail?" "Absolutely." "Did she know your social security number?" I laughed bitterly. "She could have written it from memory. She probably has mine, Mom's, Dad's, Grandpa's, and the serial number off every family member's favorite mug." Agent Patel made a note. By the time they left, the case had widened into something I could barely understand. Fraud, identity theft, forgery, wire violations, tax issues, potential elder document tampering. The inheritance had crossed state lines, and so had the evidence. Still, even with the FBI involved, there was one thing I couldn't stop thinking about. Why was Vanessa so desperate for that money? I got my answer in the ugliest way possible. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that Vanessa's husband, Greg, had filed for bankruptcy under a business name I'd never heard of. He ran a failing home renovation company and had been hiding it from everybody. The inheritance wasn't just about greed. It was about rescue. Their house was underwater, the business was collapsing, and their credit was wrecked. Vanessa had convinced herself the inheritance was family money. She was simply reclaiming before the universe took it from them. That explanation did not make it better. It made it worse. People do awful things for money all the time, but they usually don't look you in the eye while doing them and tell you it's for your own good. The FBI moved quickly after that. They pulled records. They tracked logins. They matched the notary seal to a mobile service that had been reported stolen months before. They found evidence that Vanessa had used my identity to open a line of credit in another state. They found text messages between her and Greg, talking about the Ellie file and getting Mom aligned. Aligned. Like my life was a machine they'd lubricated. I was furious, but I was also scared, because the more the investigation uncovered, the more obvious it became that Vanessa hadn't been acting alone. My mother had been helping her in ways that were harder to prove, but impossible to ignore. She had printed documents. She had held mail. She had encouraged me to stop making trouble every time I raised concerns. She had given Vanessa enough emotional cover to make the lie feel like family consensus. I was still trying to process all that when my lawyer called and said, "They've got enough for an arrest warrant." I remember sitting down hard on my couch. For Vanessa? Yes, only Vanessa. He hesitated, just long enough for me to understand the answer. "They're reviewing your mother's involvement." I closed my eyes. Maybe because I could understand greed, I could understand panic, but I couldn't understand a mother looking at her child and deciding the easiest thing was to sacrifice the one who kept telling the truth. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning while Vanessa was at my mother's house. I know, because Agent Ruiz called me right before they went in. "We're moving now. If you want to be elsewhere, that's fine." I asked, "Can I be there?" There was a pause. "You don't have to. I know, but I did." I drove the 20 minutes to my mother's house with both hands locked around the steering wheel. My lawyer met me at the curb. A black SUV was parked by the sidewalk. 2 more cars were down the block. For a neighborhood where nothing ever happened, it felt like the world had tilted. We didn't go inside right away. We stood on the front lawn while the agents knocked. Vanessa opened the door in yoga pants and a sweatshirt, hair up, no makeup. Holding a coffee mug like this was just another ordinary morning. Then she saw the badges. Her face did something strange, like it was trying on several expressions at once, and none of them fit. "Can I help you?" she asked. Agent Ruiz spoke first. "Vanessa Harper, we have a federal warrant for your arrest on charges related to identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud, forgery, and conspiracy." The mug slipped from her hand and shattered on the tile. I can still hear that sound. My mother came to the doorway behind her, one hand gripping the frame. She looked at me standing on the lawn and knew, in one glance, that the lie had reached its end. Vanessa's eyes darted to me, wild and desperate. "Ellie, don't," I said. "I can't explain." "No, you can't." She started crying instantly, but it was the ugly kind of crying people do when their emergency plan collapses. "You don't understand what I was trying to do." Agent Patel stepped forward. "You have the right to remain silent." My mother rushed forward. "Wait, please. This is a mistake." "It isn't," I said quietly. Vanessa turned on her, panic sharpening her voice. "Mom, tell them we were only trying to sort out the trust." My mother's mouth opened, then shut. For the first time in her life, she looked old to me. Not tired. Old. Like guilt had finally pressed down hard enough to bend her. Ruiz lifted a folder. "We have copies of the forged power of attorney, the false affidavit, and text messages coordinating with your husband regarding transfer of funds." Greg appeared behind the hallway, pale as drywall, holding his phone in a trembling hand. That was when I understood the whole shape of it. Vanessa had thought she was the only one in danger. Greg had thought he could hide behind her. My mother had thought loyalty could erase evidence. Every one of them had believed the truth was just another problem they could talk around if they stayed close enough to me and acted hurt enough. Vanessa looked at me like she was drowning. "You knew?" "Yes." "You set me up." I stared at her, almost in disbelief that she still had the nerve to make herself the victim. "You forged my name to steal $5 million. You were never going to share." There it was again. The same poison, the same twisted math. In her mind, if I wouldn't hand over what was mine, then she had every right to take it. The agents moved in and cuffed her while she kept talking over them, her voice rising into a plea, then a scream. My mother reached for me. I stepped back. "Ellie, please," she said. "I made mistakes." I looked at her and felt something in me go still. Mistakes are forgetting to sign a form. This was a choice. Her eyes filled instantly. I was trying to keep this family together. No, I said. You were trying to keep it comfortable for Vanessa. The FBI led Vanessa out past the front steps and toward the car. She twisted to look at me one last time, hair sticking to her wet cheeks. This is not over, she shouted. Agent Ruiz guided her head down as she got into the back seat. It was over. Not emotionally. Not in the way you think of endings when people betray you. But legally, structurally, decisively, it was over. The charges hit the papers 2 days later. Vanessa's name was in every local article. The bank froze the trust. The forged documents were entered into evidence. Her husband, seeing the writing on the wall, took a lawyer and tried to cut a deal. My mother wasn't indicted, at least not right away, but she had to sit through interviews and surrender records. Her phone, her printer logs, her email backups, all of it became part of the case. The FBI found enough to show she had knowledge and enough cooperation to make her miserable, which honestly seemed to be the universe's chosen form of mercy. I thought that would be the end of the pain. It wasn't. The worst part came after the arrest, when the silence arrived. No more late-night texts, no more fake concern, no more denial layered on top of denial. Just the empty space where my family used to pretend we were close. My mother called me 12 times in 1 week. I didn't answer. She left voicemails crying, then angry, then crying again. One day, she showed up at my apartment with a pie from the grocery store and looked so small on my doorstep that for 1 second, I almost let her in. Then I remembered how she'd looked the night she said, "Family protects family," while her daughter was committing a felony in my name. I didn't open the door. 2 weeks after the arrest, Agent Patel asked to meet me at the bank. The inheritance account had been unlocked pending the court process. They wanted me to see the evidence trail for myself. Inside a conference room with gray walls and fluorescent lights, she showed me screen after screen, the digital signatures, the fake IP logs, the document timestamps. Vanessa had accessed the file from her home office, then from a motel parking lot 2 towns over, then from a phone hotspot in my mother's driveway. She had used my identity to create a paper reality and then tried to step into it like it had always belonged to her. This, Patel said, pointing to one email chain, is what flagged the case for federal review. The same mailing address was used for multiple accounts under different names. I frowned. Different names? She clicked to the next line. My breath caught. One of the accounts had been opened under my dead father's information. Vanessa had used both of my parents' histories as collateral in her scheme. Not just mine, not just Grandpa's estate. She had tried to turn every last family identity into a tool. I sat back in my chair, stunned. Patel said quietly, "Sometimes people think they can take a little from everyone, and no one will notice. But patterns are hard to hide." That night I went home and sat in the dark for a long time. I'm not going to pretend I was suddenly healed. I was angry. I was heartbroken. I was humiliated that my own sister had used my life like a costume. I was furious at my mother for helping the lie breathe. I was grieving a grandfather who had seen all of this coming and left me the money not because he loved me most, but because he trusted me to survive the family if the family turned ugly. And he had been right. The weeks that followed were full of calls from lawyers, prosecutors, and an estate administrator who finally treated me like the rightful beneficiary instead of the inconvenient daughter. Greg flipped first, then tried to claim he had been manipulated. The prosecutor didn't seem impressed. Vanessa's bank records showed she had moved money between accounts in the middle of the night, and when investigators searched her laptop, they found draft messages to a notary, a bank rep, and even a line that said, "If Ellie pushes back, Mom will calm her down." That sentence made me sick, because it proved something I'd spent my whole life trying not to believe. She really did see me as manageable. Not dangerous, not clever. Just something that could be handled if the right person whispered in my ear. She was wrong. A month later, I had to face my mother in a courthouse hallway. She looked thinner, like stress had finally worn through all her careful posture. Her eyes went to my face immediately, searching for something I wasn't ready to give her. Ellie, she said softly. I didn't stop walking. Please, she whispered. I turned then, because I needed her to hear me clearly. You let her use my name, I said. You let her tell me I was crazy for noticing. You let me walk around thinking I was losing my mind while she built a case against me. Tears gathered in her eyes. I was trying to avoid a family destruction. You caused it. She pressed a hand to her mouth. I know. That startled me. Not because she was sincere, but because she finally sounded like someone who understood the words were true. I didn't think it would go this far, she said. That's the problem, I replied. You never think it will go this far when it's not happening to you. For a moment, she just stood there, and I could see the weight of her own choices settling on her shoulders. Maybe that was the closest thing to repentance I was going to get. I'm sorry, she said. I wanted to say, it's too late. I wanted to say, sorry doesn't undo $5 million worth of lies. I wanted to say your apology doesn't give me back the years I spent trying to earn love by being useful. Instead, I said, I know, and I walked away. Vanessa took a plea after the evidence stack got too heavy to fight. She admitted to impersonation, forgery, and the false filings. Greg got his own charges reduced after cooperating. My mother was never charged criminally, but the civil suit and the public shame were enough to hollow her out. She lost the house within the year when legal fees and liens piled up. She moved into a one-bedroom rental on the south side of town and, for the first time in my life, had to build a life without the daughter she had always treated like insurance. As for me, I got the inheritance the way it should have come all along, slowly, legally, with every document reviewed twice and every signature verified. The money didn't fix me. It didn't make the betrayal smaller, but it gave me something I had never had before, the freedom to choose my life without asking anyone's permission. I paid off my debt. I bought a modest house with creaky floors and a back porch I could sit on in the evenings. I funded a scholarship in my grandfather's name for local students who had to care for sick relatives while trying to stay in school, because that was the kind of person he had been and the kind of person I wanted to stay. A year after the FBI knocked on my door, I visited Grandpa Walter's grave alone. The grass had grown in around the stone, and the afternoon light cut across the cemetery in a way that made everything look softer than it was. I stood there for a long time with my hands in my coat pockets, listening to the wind move through the trees. I almost didn't make it, I said quietly. You were right about me seeing straight. I just didn't know how crooked everybody else could be. The wind moved again, and for a second I thought of his hand in mine, his voice rough but kind. Don't let them tell you you're small. I smiled through tears I wasn't trying to hide. They can't now, I whispered. On my way back to the car, I looked at my phone and saw a message from an unknown number. It was from my mother. I'm sorry. I know you won't answer. I just wanted you to know Vanessa was sentenced today. I hope you can have peace. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted her to suffer, but because peace, I was learning, doesn't always come from reconciliation. Sometimes it comes from refusing to hand your heart back to people who used it like a wallet. As I started the car, I thought about all the nights I'd spent wondering whether I was dramatic, suspicious, unfair, hard to love. I thought about how close I came to letting them convince me that seeing the truth made me the problem. Then I looked at the courthouse in the distance, where the federal flag moved in the wind, and I felt something settle inside me. Vanessa had stolen my identity to chase a fortune she hadn't earned. My mother had helped her believe lies were cheaper than honesty. And when the FBI knocked, the whole thing collapsed under the weight of its own greed. They took my name. They took my trust. They took my peace for a while, but they did not take my future. That belonged to me all along.